All right, we are giving this another shot. This is certainly interesting. I have to admit that TikTok Live is much easier so far than YouTube Live, at least from your phone. This seems to be actually not too bad when you're actually on a computer. So maybe that's the way to do it. I will wait for a little while for anyone to be able to join. I might even go just TikTok Live while I do this since there's not a lot of people. All right, let's take that off. Apparently there's an ad. All right. Hi, Mom. You're one of two people here. All right, so I'm also going to go live on TikTok. We're doing this both at the same time. And then, okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah, it's way easier for me to see the chat this time too. I think I'm probably going to read on screen over here, so I might not look at the chat very often. And I'm also waiting for people to join from TikTok too. But yeah, so I will read and then I will occasionally probably look over for comments, but I will do an Ask Me Anything at the end of it. And I will definitely check for comments then. All right. Cool. So I did this last night for the first time. And I actually did this on TikTok Live first. And right now I am dual streaming. I'm on TikTok Live. And then I'm also live on YouTube. And so I will take questions at the end. I'll do an Ask Me Anything for anybody who hangs out and kind of listens to the whole thing. And I'll take any questions from both, so either platform. And basically, this is a first read, or the read of my first, it's not really a first draft anymore, but revisions to my memoir. It's called Life Refocused, and it's a memoir about my battle with stage 4 cancer. And I got some feedback. I am completely new to this. I have never considered myself a writer before at all. And so this is completely new to me to even share and try to take on. But I did talk to a literary agent for just some feedback the last couple of days. And when I wrote this, I wrote it because there's a number of reasons I wrote it. And one of them is because I'm donating all my portion of the proceeds to research. But part of the reason I wrote this as well too was because it was requested from people who've kind of followed my story, and I wanted to be able to kind of share more with y'all too. And so when I originally wrote it, I wrote it with that in mind, thinking that people kind of already would know part of my story or know that I had cancer if they were picking up my book. And the feedback that I got was that it was a little bit confusing when you entered the book of like what it was about. If you know my history, it's not confusing. If you didn't know that, it definitely was. So that was really great feedback that I got. So I yesterday revised the entire first and second chapters. I've condensed it down into one, and so I'm starting kind of right in the action. So yeah, so I will read it, and I will try not to freak out as we go here, but I will look for comments as I go, and then I'll also try to scroll back if I find any pausing points. Any feedback at all, good, bad, if you hate it, if you like it, any of it helps, honestly, at all. I don't have a publisher yet, so I'm continuing to revise this thing. And yeah, okay. So we will just kick it off. My mom also, who is watching the live stream, and she's going to get mad at me for even saying this because she told me I can't tell the people on live this. But she told me that I should stop apologizing all the time. So it's good feedback from Mom. I'll try my best not to. I don't know why I get so nervous about this. First time I shared this thing, so I shared this with my mom and my mother-in-law first. And the first time I shared it, I got super nervous. And my husband had to remind me that I didn't spend a year writing a book, not to share it with anybody. So yeah, so we're sharing it. And like I said, any feedback I definitely welcome and appreciate, especially if anything's confusing. So if you find anything confusing, definitely let me know. All right, I'm done procrastinating now. All right, chapter 1. This is always so hard for me to type. Okay. As we arrived at the hospital, the large tents erected at the entrance to the building reminded me of a scene of a post-apocalyptic movie, adding to the intimidation factor. Such strange times we were living in, I thought, as my heart raced with anticipation and Brian pulled to the front to drop me at the door. We'd heard family may not be allowed inside, and although the thought of waiting alone in an ER with nothing more than the company of my racing thoughts sounded like a scene from my nightmares, we both knew we didn't have much of a choice. We'd have to make do. I let out a deep exhale as we came to a stop, looking over at Brian one final time before reaching for the door. "You've got this. Everything's going to be okay," he encouraged, grabbing my hand and passing a kiss as I reluctantly unbuckled. "And keep me updated," he reminded me as I squeezed his hand for confirmation just before stepping out and gently swinging the door shut. Gently swinging shut the door. All right. I also may edit as I do these things too. So this is also a editing session since I just put this back together. My mind raced with a million thoughts, running through every possible scenario of what could be wrong as I made my way to the entrance. My eyes began to fill with tears, overwhelmed by the conflicting emotions. I'd felt like something was off in my body for years, but no one else seemed to agree. I was terrified of what they may find, but equally as scared of leaving once again with unanswered questions and a room full of people who didn't believe me. As I approached the tent, a nurse in full PPE greeted me. As she asked what I arrived for, I instantly froze, unsure of what to say as I retraced my steps through the downward spiral that had led me here, one that can be visually tracked through my browsing history in the days leading up to my arrival. A broad search for abdominal mass would eventually turn into symptoms of liver tumors, and hours later, I'd find myself in bed watching a YouTube video over my shoulder while trying to self-examine and palpitate my abdomen for an enlarged liver. I'd knock my phone off from my nightstand again and again while I poked and prodded at my stomach with each new set of instructions. I was deep down the rabbit hole, and there was no turning back. I lost myself for hours spiraling through the worst possible scenarios before calling it a night with one last search of the evening for soothing meditation music, a clear attempt to purge the panic I'd brought upon myself, a process I'd start all over again the next day. The following morning, I woke and slid my hand over the upper part of my stomach where I'd felt the firmness beneath my ribs the night before. I couldn't feel it now. Was this all in my head? Continuing the search, I rolled to my left side and pressed in. Nothing. Then to my right. I felt a fullness and a discomfort, but still no hardness or mass. I'd lost nearly 50 pounds over the past few years, most of which had come within the last 9 months while actively trying. I channeled my frustrations over my mounting health issues and the inability to get any answers beyond the plethora of anxiety diagnoses building in my chart by going for long, multi-mile walks each day. With the pandemic in full swing, there wasn't much else to do. Plus, the handsome stranger I'd met on the internet a few months ago, who had now been cooped up in a house with 24/7, kept dropping hints that he may have an important question to ask me soon. Important questions are often followed by fancy dresses, so I figured it might be a good time to use these walks to get in shape. Each morning, I throw on an hour podcast before work and head out for a walk around the neighborhood until it finished. I'd then come back, work for 8 hours, and do it all again before dinner, typically racking up 5 to 10 miles a day. I'd also revise my diet in an attempt to get my high blood pressure under control, another symptom and a rare find for a young woman my age that no one had answers for. I'd reduced my sodium intake and lived mostly on brown rice, steamed veggies, and ground turkey. Over a few months, this had led to a pretty dramatic weight loss that even though I had been trying, I had started asking doctors about. Combined with my other symptoms, I was worried it could be a reflection of something more serious. They assured me it was fine. They'd reassure me it was fine before recommending a new antidepressant for me to get a handle on my health anxiety, which I in turn would be too anxious to ever take because I didn't feel like anxiety was the actual problem, leaving us both in a cycle of frustration. I got out of bed and made my way to the bathroom, poking and feeling around my stomach with one hand while I brushed my teeth with the other. As soon as I caught the edge of it again, I paused, held perfectly still, and called Brian back over to take a look at it before I lost it again. That lump in my stomach is here. That lump in my stomach is there again. Can you feel it? I asked as I reached for his hand. What? He replied, passing by, confused. That hardness under my ribs. It's right here. Look, feel. I pulled him over and guided his hand to where mine was. Okay, what exactly am I supposed to be feeling? He asked, the skepticism clear in his voice. I don't know. It's hard, like harder than the other side, and the edge is kind of round. Can't you feel it? I insisted. No, I just feel stomach. I don't know what I'm supposed to be feeling. I could sense his impatience mounting. I'd caught him as he was heading down to begin work, and he wasn't quite in the mindset to entertain whatever my latest hypochondriac episode seemed to be. Brian had been supportive through all my health issues, but none of my other symptoms ever panned out to be anything other than anxiety, according to doctors, and he seemed to be getting a little fatigued. I decided to wait for him to go downstairs before making my way over to the full length mirror in our closet for a better look. As I stood in front of the mirror, I'd suck in, twist to the side, crunch and turn, trying to get a glimpse of the elusive protrusion. After several tries, I started to pick up on the specific combination of breath holding, flexing, and sticking my stomach out in just the right manner to expose the bump. When I got the combination just right, I could gently press in and slightly cut my hand around it. What was this thing? While I'd never been able to cut my hand around it the way I was now, the firmness was something that I remember identifying years ago. Something I distinctly remembered because whenever I'd start a new diet or go on a workout streak, I'd always compare my body in the mirror, searching for progress. Sucking in, twisting, and flexing, honestly not too dissimilar to the contortions I had just been making, but for reasons far more vain at the time. During one of these comparisons, I found a firmness on my right side and remember wondering if it could be little baby abs budding. I've been overweight most of my life, and at 170 pounds on a short 5'1" frame, I liked the idea of progress brewing beneath the weight I struggled to melt off. I mentally congratulated myself for a job well done, and while I hadn't been met with the same firmness on the other side, I figured it might just need a little effort and attention to catch up. I reflected on that memory as I poked at it some more. I noticed the firmness before, but I didn't ever remember feeling any edges, something I swear I could feel now. I didn't know what this was, but I knew it would eat at me until I found out. In an effort to distract myself, I decided to get dressed, start work, and try to forget about it for a few hours, which worked well until I closed my laptop at the end of the day, and all the worries and intrusive thoughts, wondering if it could be cancer, resurfaced. After dinner, I went back to Google on my quest to determine what it could be and if it was worth a trip to an urgent care when mid-search, Mom called. This wasn't exactly a surprise. Although we had plenty of trying times during my adolescence, she had morphed into my best friend and my first call in adulthood. We spoke daily, so this was just another Wednesday evening. That night, I caught her up with all my recent doctor's appointments and the new hardness I'd been feeling just beneath my ribs. She began rattling off ideas of harmless propositions of what it may be, but the more I described what I had been feeling, the more the fear rushed in, and I felt myself starting to get choked up. With a motherly concern, she gently asked what was wrong. The culmination of all my worries piling up and all the time I'd spent in doctors' offices wondering if we could rule out cancer had finally caught up to me, and I admitted, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm just worried we caught it too late and that it's stage 4. We've caught it too late, that it's stage 4 and has already gone to my liver. A comment prompted by a spiraling Google search, but one that still haunts me to this day, given the predicament that I found myself in a few hours later. As we wrapped up the conversation, I looked up urgent cares around me. It was getting late, and tomorrow was New Year's Eve. If I was this worked up over it, and I didn't want to be torturing myself over the holiday, it'd be best to get it checked out now. At 8 p.m., most of the urgent cares around me had already closed, but there was one open just down the road. But there was one still open down the road about 15 miles from where we lived, closing in 30 minutes. With no time left to second guess myself, I decided to hit in. As I arrived, the parking lot was well lit but empty. It was clear I was going to be the last patient for the evening. I counted the cars in the parking lot and questioned if I should even go in at all. Walking into an urgent care 10 minutes before closing felt like walking into a restaurant as they were stacking the chairs and sweeping under the tables. I was sure everyone would be annoyed. As I made my way to check in, I could feel my heart racing as I apologized for arriving so late. The young woman at the desk could clearly sense my anxiety, assuring me it was okay before inquiring about what had brought me in. I froze and stumbled through my words. What led me to that moment felt like a culmination of far more than I could communicate in one single sentence. I started to feel a hardness just beneath my ribs. I fumbled out, breaking eye contact and gazing off to the corner of the building I wish I could disappear to. My confidence had been shaken. I didn't have the best relationship with the medical I didn't have the best relationship with the medical system. Over the past few years, I found myself in the ER twice and in countless doctors' offices in pursuit of symptoms. I never left with any answers, typically a new anxiety diagnosis added to my chart and an overwhelming sense of guilt and shame that I'd wasted everyone's time. Worried this evening may follow the same path, I averted my gaze to save myself from the judgment I was sure would be coming my way. But instead of judgment, I noticed her eyes soften as I was met with compassion. Well, let's make sure we get you back to get it looked at. Are you in any pain? I wasn't quite sure how to answer that question. I've been feeling a mild ache for several days, but it was difficult to pinpoint, and it was so dull that it often made me wonder if it was all in my head. A very dull pain that comes and goes, I responded as I passed my license and insurance under the plexiglass barrier. A few clicks, taps, and a quick scan later, she passed them back. Okay, Miss Mosman, have a seat over there, and we'll call you soon. We don't have anyone waiting, so it should be quick. Miss Mosman, I'd almost forgotten that I hadn't had a chance to completely change my name since getting married. I'd filled out all the paperwork, but was waiting for an appointment with the driver's license and Social Security office, but both were booked out for several months due to the pandemic. I filed my cards back into my wallet and sat in the lobby, taking in my surroundings while waiting to be called back. The building was new, with large windows and an open concept, something I'd come to enjoy about all the University of Utah clinics in the past few years. There was something about watching the hustle and bustle of people make their way to appointments and healthcare workers mingling in the hallways that offered a welcome distraction from the wait. But as the last patient in for the night this evening, okay, needs an edit. But as the last patient in for the night, tonight it looked much different. The halls were empty and the building was cold and quiet, leaving me alone with my worries and all the what ifs. Thankfully, it wasn't long until a nurse appeared at the doorway to call me back, and we made our way to a room. As she wrapped the blood pressure cuff around my arm and placed the pulse ox on my finger, I watched her facial expressions as she caught my heart rate. 122. Are you nervous? I had a rapid heart rate, tachycardia, for a while now, and I was used to this reaction. I'd been medicated for it. Before I was medicated for it, it was normal for me to clock in at 145 to 165 beats per minute. So honestly, 122 felt pretty reasonable. She had me take a few slow, deep breaths until we got it down to 113 and my blood pressure to 144/88 before logging it into the chart and letting me know somebody would be in to see me shortly. The door rolled shut behind her, and I could hear voices of the other nurses down the hall discussing their plans for New Year's as they closed up for the evening. As the voices trailed off, I heard footsteps approach my room, and a man walked in and introduced himself as Casey, the nurse practitioner who'd be taking care of me that evening. He was relaxed and unrushed as he asked what had brought me in. I told him about the dull ache coming from my upper right abdomen and the mass I'd recently discovered. He acknowledged my concerns, nodded slowly, then paused, waiting for me to continue. I was so used to being rushed through appointments and having my symptoms explained away that I was caught off guard at first. Wait, what else am I supposed to tell him? Do I tell him that I've been Googling my symptoms all day? Or do I keep those details close to the chest so I don't leave here with another anxiety diagnosis? I wasn't used to being given the time to fully detail all my symptoms. I'd usually start, then would be cut off with the same leading questions that always pointed us back to anxiety. I avoided eye contact as I continued, sharing with him what had really led me in. Honestly, I don't know what's wrong. I've been looking at my symptoms, and I'm a little worried that it could be an enlarged liver. So I wanted to get it looked at before the holiday. I felt ashamed to admit that I'd been Googling my symptoms all night. I'm sure they hated when patients do that. But as I looked up, I wasn't met with an ounce of judgment. He nodded once more, asked a few follow-up questions, then requested I hop onto the table so he could take a look. As I laid back, he began poking and pushing against my abdomen in a similar fashion to the YouTube video I'd watched the night before. As he made his examination, I explained that I hadn't been able to feel it while I was lying down, but it was more noticeable when I was standing. So he had me stand back up to show him there instead. I positioned my stomach in just the right position and showed him where my hand cupped around it. He then examined the area himself. After palpitating the mass and following up with a few questions, he acknowledged that he too was able to feel it. He thought it could have been an enlarged liver and suggested that I follow up with my PCP or go to the ER to get it further evaluated. I'd already mentioned it to my PCP a day or two prior, who didn't seem concerned. That didn't feel like a viable option. However, I was nervous about going to the ER. With the pandemic in full swing, I'd heard about how full hospitals were, and I didn't want to be a distraction if this all turned out to be nothing. However, after years of being dismissed, Casey was the first person to take me seriously. I felt safe disclosing my concerns to him and asking if it was really worth a trip to the ER. He further explained to me that when things go wrong, they often go wrong in our head and our abdomen. With this mass being in my abdomen, he felt it was completely reasonable to get it checked out in the ER, then assured me I wouldn't be a distraction. As we wrapped up, he asked if I had any final questions. I had a million, but he'd already been so generous with his time, I limited myself to a few more before thanking him for his time and patience. A thank you that didn't feel adequate for how much I truly appreciated his attentiveness. In a single 30-minute appointment, Casey had made me feel more seen. Screwed that up. In a single 30-minute appointment, Casey had made me feel more heard than I had felt in years. As I walked out of the clinic and back to the car, I began mulling over if I should head to the ER. I wasn't in a tremendous amount of pain, and besides the hardness in my abdomen, overall I felt okay. This didn't exactly feel like an emergency, but I had a nagging feeling that something was wrong, that no matter what I did, I couldn't seem to shake. So I decided to go in. Now that I found myself here, I wasn't quite sure how to explain it all to the intake nurse. Casey seemed to think it was an enlarged liver, but I didn't know if it actually was. Do I say that? The nurse shook my voice as I stammered through an explanation that the urgent care had sent me over, and my hands shook as I fumbled through my wallet for my insurance card. Her eyes softened with compassion as she noticed the tears forming behind my eyes while I searched for a better explanation. It's okay. Let's just get you inside, she replied, passing me a mask and ushering me into the tent for screening. With no one else waiting, she guided me through the process with the next nurse, relaying information so I didn't have to run through it all again. Then, once clear, personally escorted me and my green wristband through the makeshift hallways to the main entrance. You've got it from here, she encouraged, holding the door and gently gesturing me inside. I waited anxiously in the cold, nearly empty lobby before being called back and greeted by a chaotic scene on the other side. Beeping monitors, nurses bustling to and from rooms, and a handful of patients lining the hallways. The fast-paced yet organized frenzy reminded me of a busy intersection as I tried to keep up with the nurse escorting me back to the room. Why did they always walk so fast? My short little legs struggled to keep up. Before I knew it, we'd reached our destination and I got settled in, awaiting the doctor's arrival. I'd even been informed by the EMT starting my IV that Brian was allowed to come back and join me. I couldn't have been more relieved and instantly shot him a text, hoping he'd make it before the doctor arrived. But just as the EMT walked out of the room, a young doctor walked in. He briefly introduced himself before inquiring what had brought me here. As I began explaining my symptoms and that the urgent care had sent me for a possible enlarged liver, the skepticism was evident on his face. He had me laid back and began poking and prodding at my upper right abdomen, just as Casey had done a few hours prior. Any pain here? He asked, while pushing in one hand layered over the other. No, I replied. He adjusted locations and tried again. What about this? No pain, I confirmed. And just like that, as quickly as he had started the exam, he'd now finished and was removing his gloves as he shook his head. Yeah, I don't know what they're talking about. I don't feel an enlarged liver, he confirmed, matter-of-factly, in a bit of a dismissive and rushed tone. My cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Great, he thinks I'm a hypochondriac. Was I just wasting everyone's time? Making an attempt to sound far more casual and relaxed than I was, I informed him that I felt it most while I was standing, and that's how the nurse practitioner had felt it as well. He reaffirmed that he didn't see anything during the exam, but suggested if I really wanted to, he could order a CT just to be sure. Even if he felt a bit skeptical, this was far more than anyone else had been willing to explore. I was grateful that he was willing to do a more thorough workup. So before he left the room, I took the time to pass along a sincere and honest thank you, letting him know how much I appreciated him putting in the order just in case. He caught the tears forming behind my eyes as I shared the gratitude, causing him to pause just before he left the room. His demeanor softened, and he took a step back towards the bed, placing a reassuring hand at the edge, letting me know that we'd get everything checked out and he'd be back around to check on me soon. Due to my age and worries about the radiation they may expose me to with a CT, he ended up placing an order for an ultrasound instead, and soon the young, friendly EMT who had started my IV earlier appeared back at the door. He casually spun the wheelchair at the foot of the bed as he gestured for me to hop in. I looked back at him, perplexed. My legs were fine. Surely I could walk. The halls, the halls around here get a bit chilly, and we've got a ways to go. If you're feeling up to it, you can walk, or you can hitch a ride with me. He said, offering me up a warm blanket he'd placed on the seat. Already freezing from the glamorous hospital gown hanging off my shoulder and missing half its buttons, I bundled myself in the blanket and took him up on the offer. As he wheeled me out, I looked back towards the man on a bed just outside of my room. He appeared to be in his mid-40s, was kicked back with one leg outstretched, and seemed awfully chipper for a man boarded in the halls of the ER. I asked my new chauffeur about him, inquiring if he'd been there long. I feel bad that I have a room while he's out there, I added, feeling guilty over the fact that I wasn't exactly in much pain and was probably causing a whole bunch of fuss over nothing while occupying a room. My comment seemed to catch the EMT off guard. Oh, no, don't feel bad, he insisted. He hasn't been here long, and he's about to get discharged. That room is yours for as long as you need it. We've got you. We continued to make small talk as we made our way through the bowels of the hospital before finally reaching our destination. Good luck in there. Have them ping me when you're done, and I'll be back to pick you up. I'll grab a fresh blanket for you too, he instructed as I hopped out. As I entered the room, a bubbly ultrasound tech greeted me and politely asked how I was doing while I settled in and she prepped the equipment. Trying to make light of the situation through nervous laughter, I replied, "Oh, been better." She chuckled softly, spreading the warm gel across my stomach. "This shouldn't take long. We'll get you back to the room soon," she assured as she began the exam. Then, just as the pressure from the wand pressed in towards my ribs, the dynamic shifted in the room, and I watched all emotion drain from her face. She lifted up, pivoted, and went back for a better look. Then another and another, feverishly clicking away to capture the images. My heart began to race. She found something. After a few minutes of silence while she worked, she asked, concerned, "How's your blood pressure?" My blood pressure had been high for a number of years, one of the complaints I'd been presenting to doctors with that was continuously explained away by my anxiety, but unsure how that could be related to an ultrasound. But I was unsure of how that could be related to the ultrasound. It's not great, I replied, followed by more nervous laughter, except this time there was no laugh back. Minutes felt like hours as she continued on, gliding the wand across my stomach, pushing and twisting it into position. With no response, I lay there in silence, torturing myself and wondering what could be on the other side of that screen. About halfway through the exam, she followed along my right rib cage until it met in the middle, pressed in, and then let out a distressed sigh. She paused, tried to gather herself as she wiped a bead of sweat. She paused, trying to gather herself as she wiped a bead of sweat from her forehead. I didn't know what she'd found, but knew it couldn't be good. I watched her battle the emotions as she tried to mask her concerns and couldn't help but wonder how often she finds herself in this position. How often does she discover something that she knows will forever change the life of the person sitting in front of her, knowing for a brief moment she's the only one in the world who knows but is unable to say a word? I can't imagine the toll that takes. I waited back in the room with Brian as results as results and bad news slowly started filing in over the next several hours. First, someone stopped by to tell us they'd seen something on my liver, but not to worry, and they were sending me to CT for a better look. As if our room had suddenly become radioactive, anyone delivering us news exited as quickly as possible before we had any time for questions, stopping in for quick updates with one foot out the door and leaving us behind with a live bomb to disarm with a Google search and trembling hands. In less than 24 hours, we'd gone from looking up the best neighborhoods to raise a family in to Googling survival stats. How did we end up here? All right. That's it. um, so that was the end of first chapter. Thanks for everybody who joined. I just realized I was probably like reading super close. So sorry, all of y'all that were on YouTube. I'm going to scroll back and see if I see any comments, but I welcome any feedback at all. Good feedback, bad feedback. If you were confused, if you liked it, literally any of it helps me. So I appreciate it. And yeah, so I'm also going to do an Ask Me Anything for folks that hung out here. So I'm going to scroll back through the comments, but if you have any questions you want to ask, feel free to drop them in the comments. Aw. Thank you. That means the world to me. I got some feedback that it resonated with somebody else that had a similar experience. I hate that anybody else had a similar experience, but it really means a lot to me because that's why I'm sharing this. So thank you. Don't stop. Thank you. You guys are very nice. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Did any of it sound confusing or anything like that? So one of the things that I like, so I've never considered myself a writer ever. This is like the first thing I've written. So it's really been hard for me to even gauge like how my writing is, but writing memoir is also hard. And I've found that it's tough that this is one of the first things I've written because writing a memoir, I have all of the memories of all these moments. So I can fill in the gaps of what the scene looked like and what everything was like. And so I've really struggled to know if if the words on the page are communicating properly in a way that can be followed along by everybody else. Just because I don't know, like I have those memories to depend on. And so it's very helpful. If anybody else didn't think that if there was anything that felt like it was a little disjointed or confused on, definitely let me know. Or if the scenes felt like they were pieced together and you could kind of picture it, then that's super helpful too. Oh, thank you. I don't have a publisher or editor yet. The I My full manuscript has been requested by an acquiring editor that I like super want to work with. So fingers crossed for that. But I also know that this is a very, very hard category. And so like memoir is really hard in general. And then memoirs on illness are even harder. So it can be really hard to get picked up by a traditional publisher. But I'm trying. I told myself I'd give it a couple months of trying that before I decide to go a self-publishing route. Thank you so much. You guys are great. Yesterday I had in here, if you go to the link in either of my bios on YouTube or on TikTok, or you just go to katiecakescancer.com, I have an email list there. And if you want to put your email in, I don't send out any spam. It's just to be notified of when the book release comes out or when the book comes out. I will also admit that like, as I'm trying to find a publisher, they want to know people want to read your book. So any signups or emails on there definitely help me in trying to find a publisher too. So I definitely appreciate any signups or emails there as well too. Thanks, Jim. I appreciate that. Thanks, John. That means a lot to me. Yeah, I have been super nervous to share this. Yesterday, I thought I was going to chicken out. I did this on TikTok first, and I tried not to really let a lot of people know yet because I knew if there was too many people on the live, I'd chicken out. and I almost chickened out yesterday. So if there's anybody on TikTok live that was here yesterday, hopefully I did a little bit better getting through it this time. Aw, thank you. Oh, that means a lot to me. Okay, I'm not gonna cry on here. The feedback really does mean a lot to me. I guess I'll kind of share as I like wait for any other. Thank you so much, Chloe. I just saw that you just subscribed. Thank you so much. That really does mean a lot to me. Like anytime I see one of the notifications come across that I get a sign up on my email list, I get so. And I just saw another one. Oh my gosh! Thank y'all. That really does mean a lot to me. Um, but yeah, so I guess I'll share what I had changed about the book. So my mom, I don't know if she's still watching. My mom said she was going to join the live. I was just talking to her on the phone before I joined here, but my mom actually got the very first read of my full manuscript. And the chapter one looked a lot different when she read it because I've had two revisions since then. Um, the current chapter one used to be chapter three. And then I had um, another chapter. I had basically started with like me feeling. So this was how big the tumor was. This is what I was feeling when I'm describing in that first chapter of like feeling this through my abdomen. This is what that was. Um, this is a tumor. It's a 3D replica of the tumor that was on my kidney. Oh, I saw another one. Thank you so much. Um, and they, sorry, that distracted me because I got so excited. um, So this is what I was feeling. And I how the chapter had happened before is I described like me feeling around and like feeling this. And I went much more into detail of like me feeling it over the day. Um, and then I jumped into the ER in chapter two of me actually arriving. And then the feedback that I had gotten from the literary agent was basically like, if you don't know me and you don't know kind of like that this was what I was feeling, that was kind of confusing and that my first chapter seemed more like about weight loss than my diagnosis. Oh my gosh, y'all are making me feel so happy. Thank you. The signups really do help me pitch to agents. I like just learned at a conference that you needed. I thought email lists were a little old fashioned. I didn't think that that was kind of what people look for anymore. But no, I found out very much email list is very important when it comes to finding an agent. But yeah, so I got the feedback that it was kind of confusing and it kind of sounded more like I was talking about like weight loss and my cancer. And I had kind of gone into the book thinking anybody picking up the book probably knew my story. But that's not the right way to write a book that you're trying to get to people that have not heard your story. So that was really great feedback. And so yesterday is when I revised this. And so this was just the second read of it, which is why you notice I stumbled a couple times and had to reword a couple things because I'm sure I'll tweak this a little bit more as I go still too. Thanks, Mom. My mom says it's a great book. Thank you so much, Stephen. That really means a lot. Multiple chronic illnesses. I know your journey is not the same, but I feel for you. Thank you so much. I've said this a couple times to people that sometimes I think chronic illness is harder than anything that I've gone through. Because so many people who are diagnosed with chronic illness, I think, go through a lot of what I went through and what I describe in this first chapter. And I describe it a little bit more once I get the diagnosis in some of the later chapters as well, of like all the appointments of having people not believe you or not having answers to things. And kind of that whole process. I know that that's a lot of what people who have chronic illness deal with. So, yes, exactly. It's a lot of hurdles that y'all deal with. So, definitely sending a bunch of love right back to you because I think the battles are very similar. Battles, journey. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about all those words, but I haven't come up with a better one yet. I have a podcast with a woman named Julie. She also is a cancer patient, and she used the term cancer experience, and I like that a little bit better. I mean, I think like most experiences, like you sound like you want to go for an experience. Like that should be a positive thing. Cancer is not quite positive, but I do like cancer experience, I think, better than journey. I don't know. We're still trying to name it. If anybody's got a better term to use, oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I haven't ever seen that one before. That was new. Ah, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So I am still looking for beta readers of my book for like the full manuscript. So I'm gonna see if I can friend you on here. I'll follow you. Yeah, I followed you back. So if you want to send me a message or anything like that, I would absolutely love that. I definitely am looking for a couple more beta readers. I'm trying to get through my current beta reads, and then um, I'm going to get a beta read after that. I don't feel like I'm good with grammar and um, a lot of that stuff, so I know I'm going to need a lot of like copy edits. But yeah, most of the structure is there currently now. I have one chapter that I might cut out that I'm still deciding on. Illness in itself is a journey. Had both. Yes, 100%. And this person says each person's story is valid in its own right. I 100% agree with that. I also know that like earlier stage patients, I feel like often tell me like, oh, but it's nothing like what you had. And I completely feel that like no matter what stage of cancer you're diagnosed with, like what you're dealing with is contextual for what you have experienced. And I think that the fear is very, very similar. I think just hearing the words cancer, that you have cancer, brings on a lot of fear and anxiety. And I think that's something that people face regardless of what stage it is. Thank you so much. I'm definitely gonna take a look for your message after I end the live here. So I said I would do an ask me anything. So if anybody has any questions, it can be questions about the book, it can be questions about publishing. I can share what my experience has been so far of that. Or I also just do an ask me anything. You can ask me anything about the cancer, anything, really anything. It's been a while since I've uh, done a live where I did this consistently. I used to go live probably at least once a week. Indie bookstore. Oh yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you. Thank you as well too. I don't know how so now I'm on YouTube, and I'm not sure how to get in contact with people on YouTube because I definitely know I don't know YouTube nearly as much. I'm gonna take a screenshot of your username so I can try to get in contact, and then maybe we can touch base on like a beta read or something like that. Oh, that's awesome too. Thank you so much. You guys are awesome. I got a bunch of people volunteering for beta readers here. Yeah, so I'm gonna have I don't know. I've got 2 out for beta reads right now. One of them actually is a beta read. The other one is my best friend of like 20 years. And so she gets a copy of it before it's actually published because she's got like almost an entire chapter that I have in there with her. So that one, I'm not sure the pace that she'll be able to read it at. So I don't know if that's quite a beta read, but I wanted to make sure she had a copy of it and could read through it first too. But in general, I want to get like at least 2 more beta readers before I get through the edit phase, and then like 1 or 2 beta readers after the edit phase. Maybe only 1 more reader before the edit phase. Thank you so much. That really means a lot to me. That was part of the reason why I chose to write this. There's several reasons why I chose to write it. But one of the reasons why I chose to write it was because, like, when I was first diagnosed, I was terrified and I didn't know what to expect. And a lot of what I pictured stage 4 cancer as was kind of what I had seen in like books and movies and TV shows. And so I didn't really have an idea of what to expect. And so I really wanted to be able to like offer up a story with a slightly different ending and perspective to hopefully give somebody a little bit more hope than I had at the time. All right, so I will do questions for probably like 5 or 10 more minutes, and then I'll wrap up I really, really appreciate everybody who joined. It really means a lot to me. I've been so nervous to share this thing because it is definitely nerve wracking to share something that you've been writing for a year and like not had feedback on. I think my biggest fear was that I was going to have written this entire thing and then spent a year on it and then found out that like I had to change all of it. Um, yeah, I don't know if I could even go through and do all of that again. It's a lot of writing. I can only assume this diagnosis has brought up a lot of grief and other complicated emotions and the inner experiences for you. Do you feel comfortable sharing your process of working through those? Yeah, absolutely. That's a fantastic question. So, um, it's actually kind of funny. So, I really, okay, I will admit, I don't typically really like writing in itself. But I did really enjoy, like enjoy is a weird word to use here. I don't know if I want to say enjoy. Um, but I really appreciated the fact that this like made me kind of relive everything and address some things that like I hadn't thought about. I share a lot on social media and I share my story a lot. So I'm used to kind of sharing the experience. And when I first started sharing at the very beginning, before I had written this book, like I used to get choked up kind of thinking through all those things again. But then I've kind of gotten used to sharing very specific parts of my story. But what writing the book did is it made me have to dive deep into the dialogue and some of the things I was thinking. Like I share some very personal things with like my husband and I as I was going through the diagnosis, and I share some very personal things with like my best friend and I, and um, they those are things that were not shared on social media. And so as I'm trying to paint the picture and describe those things with people, I really had to tap into those emotions again. And so it was actually it was very cathartic to go through it. But it was also kind of funny because I'd read to my husband, I'd write a chapter, I'd write a section, and then I'd read to my husband every night as I finished writing it. But sometimes he'd be like walking by as I was writing, and I would just be like covered in tears and like all gross from writing about a part that was particularly hard to deal with. But then at the same time, I'd be like laughing at myself because like I was tapping into those like really raw emotions and the kind of trauma behind all of it. But at the same time, like I know how the story ends. I know I make it through the process that I'm describing at that moment. So I think that's kind of what got me through kind of readdressing all of that is like not taking myself too seriously and like laughing at the fact that I was crying and that like it was very traumatizing. I don't know, self-deprecating humor has always kind of gotten me through most hard things. And so yeah, I kind of just leaned back on that. It definitely was like traumatizing to relive through all of that again and feel those emotions again. But I could also recognize that that was the past and not where I currently am. Are you going to stay in Texas? We just moved to Boston for healthcare. Yeah, so I moved to, I know you like MD Anderson, but you also go to the NIH a lot. So I'd wonder if you head to DC. Yeah, so I actually moved to Texas to go to MD Anderson. Um, I originally am from Utah, and then my husband and I moved down to Austin after I got diagnosed. So I think we're going to stay here. It's actually kind of funny. I grew up in Utah, but I spent most of my 20s through in Austin, and so I always kind of considered Austin home. And I had moved back to Utah very very temporarily when I met my husband, and I did not plan on staying there long term. Um, but he had a job at the time that he couldn't leave, and so we were planning to build a house and start a family and everything like that in Utah. And then when I got diagnosed, MD Anderson, of course, is one of the best cancer centers in the country. And so, since what I had was super, super rare, we decided that we would move back down to Texas to go to MD Anderson. And I wanted to live in Austin, not Houston, because I like Austin a little bit more. And so, he always gives me a hard time that I could have found a less dramatic way to get myself back to Austin instead of getting cancer. um, but yeah, so we're gonna stay here in Austin. We both work remotely. I travel back and forth to the NIH a lot, but um, not too much that it's much of a hurdle. If I was on like active treatment, I think it would be different. But where we're at now, it's not a whole lot of travel. Can you tell us again how to describe? Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. So if you follow me up there at the top, or you go to my link in my bio, it's katiecakescancer.com. And that is, as soon as you hit that page, there'll be a box that pops up that you can type in your email address. And that's the list to subscribe so that you'll be notified as soon as the book is released. If I go self publishing, my goal is to put it out by the end of the year, if not kind of the very beginning of next year, which would be a very quick turnaround to get this thing out. But if I go traditional publishing, it'll probably be a bit longer. Thank you so much. That really means a lot to me. Thank you, Dan. Yay. I'm so glad to hear that it was good too. I was trying to look at your picture here. That is fantastic. That makes me super happy to hear. All right. So I am going to wrap up here now. Thank you for joining, and for hanging out. If you think of any other feedback, or like good or bad, I always welcome any of it. And I appreciate y'all for following. Like I said, if you want to sign up to my email list, that makes a really big difference for me, and I really appreciate it. But yeah. So I hope everybody has a great weekend and a great night. And thanks for joining. All right. See y'all.